really didn't like you after the first Winning Wednesday. 2 weeks later, I was like, are you gonna post this or what? Like, there was like a long time where I felt like I was like, I don't even like this person, and I don't even care if she posts it, and maybe I'm gonna tell her that she shouldn't post it because I'm sick of her. And I just built up this whole thing, and now I think that's funny to look back on.
It is funny to look back on, and I love your candor and just your honesty about that really was great for me. I mean, I have blind spots, we all do, and it's great to learn, from other people and just continue to transform. And here we are. I think we couch a lot of things from a place of fear of being canceled or questioned and not being able to defend ourselves or explain ourselves in a way that someone else is going to understand effectively.
Being able to shift like a conviction, you're never going to change this conviction. Something comes along, makes you change it. It's like when you hear a song for the first time and you're like, what was I doing before I heard this song? And you're like, how did I even live life?
Hi, Joe. Welcome to Becoming You.
I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited for this new kind of production you have going, new format. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm actually thrilled to have you on. I know that you were on Winning Wednesday, so you have an understanding of what that series was about from the perspective of meeting people kind of for the first time, having a chat out of thin air, showing people how easy it is to network and meet new people. And since then, you and I have actually had the opportunity to kind of grow our professional relationship and meet in person over the summer. And then here we are on Becoming You, where I'm actually trying to curate an audience and guests on the show who I actually know better and who know me better, because I think that that speaks a lot to our evolution as human beings. So how does it feel to see that iteration and be part of that, and then to be here now at the early stages of Becoming You?
Um, well, I think that it's good that we did Winning Wednesday, and then we met probably like over a year later. But it's
Right.
only been maybe 3 or 4 months ago. But
Mhm.
to find out that the person is pretty much the same. I mean, they're authentic to themselves, and if you weren't, or I felt like, uh, actually meeting her in person, not the person I thought she was, I probably would pass on any invite. But you're as real as I feel like I am, so I'm happy to be here. That and to know that you're authentically yourself, because there are people that we know that you meet them in person, or their persona online is not the same, and I think your personas match.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I feel the same way about you. I think that's why we clicked. We kind of view things similarly. We both create content for LinkedIn. I know it can kind of be a double-edged sword sometimes, but I agree, like being your authentic self online, finding a way to tell your own story while staying true to yourself, but also inviting people into that conversation, not being so like one way or the other, is really important for the online space. And then of course when you meet in person, you want to feel that same connection carries over from a virtual environment, and that it was genuine and wasn't just like, I want a bunch of followers. Like, no, I care about my connections. I care about the people I chat with.
Hmm.
And I think even for like the Winning Wednesday podcast, it was a way to kind of continue networking virtually while we were shut down, while we didn't have access to meeting new people organically through networking events and these normal, happy hours and get-togethers. And that can be really challenging too when you're meeting people online and you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. So, have you had experience with that?
Um, in terms of like struggling to like the the struggling to network part, or I was lost in thought because I really wanted to say that I really didn't like you after the first Winning Wednesday, and you know this, and now we're
Right.
besties, but I just didn't know your work style. I didn't have any. You set a lot of upfront expectations with this podcast,
Mhm.
whereas before Winning Wednesday, I didn't have any expectations about how you were going to operate or when it was going to be posted, because it was like we did it, and then it was like 6 months later that you actually posted it, and like 2 weeks later, I was like, are you going to post this or what? Like, I spent all this time, so I was very frustrated. But then when we figured it out, it was just like, well, it's not even anyone's fault. It's just how you operate. So
Yeah.
uh, there was like a long time where I felt like I was like, I don't even like this person, and I don't even care if she posts it, and maybe I'm going to tell her that she shouldn't post it because I'm sick of her. And I just built up this whole thing, and now I think that's funny to look back on.
It is funny to look back on, and I love your candor. I think you told me that for the first time when we met in real life, and I was like so blown away because prior to having you on the show, we kind of knew of each other loosely. Like we both had our brands on LinkedIn and we engaged with each other's content, but it's almost superficial if you haven't actually chatted live with the person. And then of course I had you on the show in my, bubbly way of having my great first impressions that I really pride myself on. I think I can like kick that, or hit that out of the ballpark. But the
Hmm.
follow up was a real opportunity for me that I didn't even realize people cared about that communication afterwards or how it would impact even their brands. Like that could have been content that you could have shared on your platform if you wanted to. But up until that point, so many people who had been on my show, they didn't share anything on their platform. They didn't really care about the follow up. And so I was just basing it off of that. I was brand new to podcasting. It was like before podcasting was so mainstream. And just your honesty
Yeah.
about that really was great for me. I mean, I have blind spots, we all do, and it's great to learn, from other people and just continue to transform. And here we are. So it's all
Okay.
good. Which is funny because when I think about like becoming you, it's this constant evolution of who you are as a person, taking your own life experiences, taking other people's perspectives of you, of with coupled with their own life experiences, and what do you take away from that? What do you want to own for yourself, and what's not for you, and you're going to let that part of it go. Um, and I'm curious for you, Joe, like what have you seen in your life where you've really felt either a tug on your heart or your intuition has been really strong, you've wanted to like follow that on your journey of becoming yourself?
I think in terms of like heartstrings and like, intuition, your gut pulling you in a certain direction, it's always, I feel like it's an intellectual need, but it has to go apply it somewhere or to tell somebody, and always kind of talk about myself as like a pontificator, which is more like a religious connotation. It's kind of tongue in cheek, but it's also like I had realized when I wrote my first book, somebody said, "You know that you use like a ton of Catholic imagery, right?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Right.
And I talk about like, don't crucify me for this, and like you use the word like zealot and stuff. And I'm like, I guess I do use a lot of religious icons to talk about my ideas, which
Mm-hmm.
is pontiff, the Pope, pontification. And I think like I feel a need to take philosophy that is complex, shrink it down, and tell other people about it. Not preach, but tell other people about it without facts. This is the main crux of my life, is that I always feel like people want to know like what are the facts about, how's that going to work. I'm a big personality type person. People always want to challenge me there on like validity and reliability. I'm like, no, nope, not. I'm not even going to go there. It is there, but I'm more of a like standing on my convictions and
Right.
pontificating out into the world.
Mm-hmm. That's so
So
interesting.
philosophical, uh, helping people do like philosophical discussion about their life mindset, stuff like that. I think that's what tugs at my heart.
That's really interesting. And I think that's a space that not a lot of people like to play in because it's very in depth. It requires deep thinking or self reflection, or even just thinking about how did folks in history view the world and talk about it and discuss it, and how can we translate some of that vernacular into today's language. If you didn't grow up like in the church or a big history buff, those words pontificate may not resonate in the same way that they do for you, and yet that's something that you feel strongly about, and that's part of like your mission when you write books. Like that's just your natural tone, within the chapters. So do
Hmm.
you ever find yourself adjusting for that in different audiences, or how do you kind of see that manifesting?
That's a really good question, and it's when I look at writing, the type of writing that I like I'm a big fan of Nietzsche. You He has a very that era of time, like the late 1800s, early 1900s, has a very what you call masculine style of writing, which means that you don't hedge. There's no hedging. There's no sometimes I've seen, or oftentimes, or in certain cases you just say it is this way.
Mm-hmm.
People
Right.
are
Right.
things, this is. And you get challenged all the time, but the thing when you read that is you think this person really knows what they're talking about because they are not equivocating or riding the fence on anything.
Hmm.
Today's writing about philosophy or self-help is it's very, God forbid, feminine, because it hedges a lot. It doesn't like to say that things are. It says sometimes my experience tells me that, but
Hmm.
it's not very effective because it doesn't. It allows too much room for it to um, be like, well, I didn't say it's always. I didn't say always. So
Right.
you never really have to hold true to your convictions. And I think that just some of it's not very palatable in today's world. And I think that as close as I can get to just being like challenging people enough without like getting canceled.
Right. It's
That's
a
it.
fine line. It's a balance, you know. I think we couch a lot of things from a place of fear of being canceled or questioned and not being able to defend ourselves or explain ourselves in a way that
Yes.
someone else is going to understand effectively. There's some value to doing that.
Yes.
To your point, like you can have very strong convictions, but maybe you learn something new and now your convictions shift a little bit. And you want to have that wiggle room just to give yourself some grace. Like we're growing, we're changing. I mean, who I was 10 years ago is not who I am today. You know, I'll be the first to say that. I apologize, you know, blanket statement, but it's also like I'm loving myself through this life and I'm giving myself grace to make mistakes, grow from that, and push through instead of just giving up. I mean, it's easy to give up and think, like, well, what's the point of even trying to do something like this? Like, have a conversation so boldly and publicly if it's just going to lead to potential backfire down the road because I said something too strongly and I didn't leave enough like
Yeah.
gray in the conversation.
I mean, what you just said about uh, what did you just say? It reminded me about, oh, like being able to shift like a conviction. You're never going to change this conviction. Something comes along, makes you change it. I read a book recently by Rick Rubin. He's a super ultra producer of like every band that you've ever heard of. He's been
Oh,
involved in
nice.
Def Jam Records, Chili Peppers,
Wow.
Slayer, Pantera, all these bands, and he wrote this book called The Creative Act, and it I think I texted you yesterday. I said it wrecked my life, and it was in a good way. It's like
Yeah.
when you hear a song for the first time, and you're like, "What was I doing before I heard this song?" And you're like, "How did I even live life?"
Right.
That's what this book did, and I just finished it yesterday. It's an audiobook, so it only counts for half a book in my mind, but it's still
Yeah.
a book, and it changed my whole perspective on writing, what art is, what your relationship to art should be. You're a content creator, Katrina, and it's something that um, if you read it, you will just go, have never seen, I've never heard of this before, but I'm embracing it fully.
Hmm.
And it is going to be in my intro of my second book about how, as I was writing my second book, I read this book, and now I have to rewrite my second book because of what I've learned. So, to
Wow.
your point about you have this conviction, you
Hmm.
hear something or read something, and then everything crumbles, and you got to rebuild it better.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, when I was in my 20s, I wouldn't have left any space for that. In high school, absolutely not. I knew everything, you know? And the way I saw the world like was the right way. And it comes from this very black and white, you know, Catholic upbringing mindset. And it's hard to unlearn some of those patterns and reshift your focus. So even when you're taking in new information years later, it's going through this filter of black and white, left and right. Like, how do I sort this in my head? And I have to consciously and kind of encourage myself to think in that gray area and how can I understand someone else's perspective and think about like how does this apply to my situation, and to have gone through a feat like yourself. I mean, writing a book is a passion of mine. I haven't done it yet, but I want to, and you're already on your second book, which I marvel at. But I can only imagine like you spend all this time pouring yourself out into a book and then you hear something else that is so profound and impactful, and luckily at the right time, right? Like you didn't press publish yet on the book, so you still have a grasp and a chance to kind of shift gears a little bit if you want to. But to even take that effort to do that in this moment, it probably requires a lot of energy and strength and just humility too, I think, to take that step back and, you know, be open to hearing another opinion and taking some time to reflect on what can I do with this now that I know this information.
That's what it was, and it also, you would probably agree with this too. It had to be from a respected person that is far more accomplished than I am, someone that's
Right.
worked with many different artists. You're talking like rock bands, you're talking extremely esoteric bands, and has just said like, this is the what I have seen, and I trust me, I've put out a lot of great stuff, and I go, this is someone I need to hear about. And I
Hmm.
think you would probably feel the same way if you were going to take advice. Is I want someone that's accomplished and uh, whereas some people just want credentials but not accomplished. Those are different.
Right.
um, so I took this to heart, and I was like, man, it's just, I love that kind of feeling, because then it gives you revived energy for the project. And honestly, I
Mhm.
felt kind of like I was stuck with some of my projects. I would do anything to avoid like writing.
Right. I believe it. And checking your sources is huge. You know, you don't want to go off on a whim just because you heard something and it shook your confidence enough, but you didn't really check that source to find out, are they credible? Should I really believe what they're saying? Is this someone I respect, and can appreciate? So that really, says a lot. When I think
Hmm.
about your own content too, like you are a person I respect, I listen to in the accounting world, in the
Oh yeah,
personality world,
sweet.
when it comes to being an author too, like I know your first book was kind of like, I have to get this out of my system, but my second book is going to take, a little bit more finesse because you kind of, I mean, it's just part of our journey, right? Like even with this podcast, I told you yesterday, I was like, I know it's not perfect. I'm learning a new platform, but I just need to get started. I can't keep waiting. I can't keep sitting with this idea. I need to test it out, flesh it out, and see where it takes me. So when you're writing content on LinkedIn, you're being authentic, as we talked about earlier, and you're met with trolls on the internet. I just see you showing up in such a great way. You're consistent, you're honest to yourself, you're not necessarily argumentative, but you're giving people room to think for themselves and to have a discussion. How do you manage, this realism that not everyone's going to look at things the same way, but you're a very down to earth thinker, so you'll call things as they are, but also maintaining your self confidence and not getting challenged by people who may, have a different opinion?
I think the answer to that is that I'm trying to think.
Take your time.
Can you? I feel like I had it. I feel like as you were finishing the question, I had the perfect answer, and then I forgot it instantly. Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, sure. And I won't use so many words, but essentially, I was wondering when you're creating your content online and you have it in the back of your mind, like there's going to be trolls out there that may be like challenging your take, but you're being honest and authentic with the way that you present it while being your down to earth, like realistic self. Yeah, is that enough?
No, it's great because that it's part of my personality and part of my shadow personality is to stir the pot for conversation.
Mm,
You would you and I have had discussions in the past about like there's a lot of safety in the herd saying things that everyone agrees with. Like when people say I'm going to have a hot like you, someone's got to say it, and it's something like the most milk toast lukewarm take you've
right,
ever
right.
heard, and
Yeah.
we're just like, and you see like 18,000 likes and 4,000 comments, and you're like,
Mhm.
okay, so it doesn't actually take that much to stand out. So all you have to do is kind of say something that's like semi bold, but also purposely leave it vague. This is what I don't think content creators get right. Like I'll say something like this. I'll say, I posted something about an interview question that I was hoping I would get this response, and I did. It was like, is it okay to ask the question, um, uh, when do you plan to retire?
Mm,
And it's like, that I framed it in that way precisely because I knew that it was not an HR nightmare, not technically an HR violation, but
right.
also recruiters and candidates are gonna, everyone will have an opinion on it. That's the other thing, is you got to
Yeah.
have it. It's got to be worded in a way that leaves ambiguity so people can join the discussion.
Hmm.
It's not a yes no. Everyone from that's from a C-level person to someone starting their career will have an opinion on it.
Yeah. Well, I would even interject with our culture nowadays. Everyone's trying to retire early. You could ask that question to anyone at any stage in their career, and they could have a different answer for you. And it might not be what you expect. Like someone in my age bracket, you might think, of course, I'm going to retire when I'm 70, but if my goal is to be ambitious and retire at 35, 40, 45, like that may catch you off guard, and it's still driving at the same answer. Like, how long can I foresee you being part of this organization? And that's really what the question
Right.
is.
So I think I got a little bit off topic, but like one of the other things I said is like, I said, uh, recruiter, talent acquisition, and headhunter. And then I said, what
Yes.
is the most correct term?
Right.
Which of course is so annoying for people because of course there's a million debates on what's the right term.
Yeah.
And when I get trolled, like you said, or when people like contest an idea of mine, I do this sort of like, I confirm their comment,
Mhm.
but I don't, like I'll say, well, that is certainly one of the ideas out there.
Right. Right.
It doesn't have like, I'm not agreeing. I'm saying wow, or it'll be like many people have said this.
hmm
If I don't agree with it, I don't really want to contest it because it does, if it doesn't add or it's not so insightful. Like, I never thought about that. This is a great insight, because most of the time it's just like it doesn't add to the conversation.
Right.
I
So
don't delete it. I just let it sit there. But I do let them know that I heard them and I respond.
yeah,
But it's never,
yeah.
it's neutral.
I love that. So let me ask you, where did you get your composure from, would you say?
It's just developing a inflated ego.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Well, what I mean by that is like, I believe you have to have a strong sense of worth, and you have to have a healthy ego to put yourself out there online. Know that people are gonna say a lot of things about you, and to still, like, to not fall apart at the first negative comment,
Mhm.
or to not question your career, or to not delete the post.
Right.
Um, if you know,
Yeah,
so
you're chickening
the
out, you're
composure is
taking
just,
that fear, like, "Oh my god, I
yeah.
put this into the ether and now I'm getting attacked," like, we come from this, like, animal brain, like, "I need to self-preserve and save myself," so you delete the post, but what does that do when you delete the post?
Well, it hurts me. It hurts my ego, but also it lets them know that they like won or something. Like, I don't know. They definitely wait for your next post and try to make you delete that one.
Yeah.
The real thing is, like, last month, Katrina, what was the most important post you saw?
Is this a trick
Hold on.
question?
2 weeks ago, what was the most important post on
Oh, okay,
LinkedIn that
so
you
your
saw?
point is, like, it's transient, right?
It doesn't matter. Literally does not matter. Like, you could have the
Yeah,
best take ever,
yeah,
and sometimes they'll re-show you a one day or 1 week ago, or like maybe even 1 month ago. But if it was a bad post, it's not coming up ever again. Just let it
yeah,
sit.
yeah, that's so true. And I think it's hard to feel that in the moment. So many things in life, especially social media, but just a lot of different things, they can feel so intense in the moment. You feel like you need to react right now. You have to have the clever response. You have to do the right thing in this moment. Time is of the essence. And if I don't figure this out and solve for it right now, then my life is ruined. And that feeling can also linger. Like, it could be a year later and you might still be thinking about that moment. But for everyone else, like, they've all moved on. So how do we let go of, that just knee jerk reaction to have to react and move to a place of like processing and responding on our own time and not feeling so attached to these things?
It's so, I don't. This is probably more of like a philosophical thing, but I mean, unless your business is solely running off social media, it doesn't really matter
hmm
about like singular posts that you get attacked for, or anything, because people have lives. Some people don't have lives, so they really care about social media. But other people, like, they just have, life goes on, and they get really worked up over your post. They comment on it. I've commented on stuff and be like, and I saw like a like on it like a week later. I was like, I can't even remember that comment, but I
Right.
remember, like, it seems like I really cared. I think
Mhm.
most people are like that. So you have to just have a long term perspective on that sort of thing, because in the opposite direction, could someone could come to you and be like, "Man, did you see that post I did yesterday?" And be like, "No, I already forgot about it." So
Yeah.
just take a longer term approach to it. That's
Yeah.
very easy to say, but hard to do.
Right. But it's good perspective to have. Zoom out and think about,
Hmm.
is this going to affect me in a year? And what does anyone else think about it? I read this book
Right.
about, the fear of other people's opinions, but basically we just have to shut it down. Like we can't worry so much about what other people are thinking unless it's, somehow fueling us towards becoming our best selves. But even then, like that's not usually where we get tripped up on other people's opinions. Usually it's a detractor and it's not actually serving us.
Hmm. And a lot of people, I've met so many successful people that like don't even know how to use LinkedIn.
Right.
Only the
I'm still
successful people are on LinkedIn, I think, apparently.
Yeah, yeah. It blows my mind when people are just now creating their LinkedIn and then they reach out to me and they're blowing up my feed and they have like 60 connections. And I'm just like, where did you come from? Like it's wild. And the etiquette, I don't think for LinkedIn translates from other platforms. So people will come in like guns blazing, filling up the inboxes with their copy paste messages and then getting offended when you say anything human back to them. And I'm like, but you don't even know me and you didn't look at my page and you're saying all these things that are like in left field and I'm responding to you as a human being who read this and took the time to read it. I mean, you interrupted my life and now here I am reading this and I'm responding to you, but then you're coming back and kind of trying to attack me for not giving you the
Right.
time of day. And I'm like, I've given you more than enough time. And it's
Yes.
crazy. I know you go
That's
through
funny.
this too. Yeah.
I go through it a lot with because I'm a recruiter, I get a lot of people just blasting me with messages and trying to sell me stuff. So, if it's not a bot or someone that's, just sending a copy paste, I'll probably respond, but yeah, it's a delicate balance. You don't want to alienate everyone because there
Yeah.
is power in, like, if you really become a name as being a real Richard online, you can, you can get your
Define
career
that. What does
ruined.
that mean? A real Richard online.
I mean, um,
Is that like the nickname, like what Richard's nickname was? Is that what you're saying?
well, I mean, what do people as Richard go by, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just because it's very easy to get called out. You can get, like, if somebody has a bad experience with you as a business owner, as a marketer, as a just whatever. I've
Mhm.
even had I've even seen people post like, this recruiter name
Yeah.
treated me like crap and blasted it all over, and I
Yeah.
messaged that person, did this happen? And they responded and told me what happened. And but like, it's so easy to have that happen. Your
Yeah.
employer could see it, like, it's the professional getting canceled. But so you can't just respond out of anger. I just block them instantly.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
But
Remove
I
the
guess that's it goes back to being trolled and all that. It's just like, you can block them, you cannot respond. You just I think it's health. I think it's good to have a semi healthy ego, know what you're worth. But that
Mhm.
I didn't know what my worth was until I'm 34 right now. So I feel like I didn't even know what I was going to do with my life till I was about. I keep telling people they're 29, like
Yeah.
this vague sense of it till I was about 30.
Right. I would say 29 turning 30, you hit 30, your life changes. Like the morning I woke up on my 30th birthday, my body was just aching immediately. I'm like, wow, we wasted no time, you know?
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
But I mean, it was during the pandemic, like the very early stages of quarantine and everything. But
Right.
it's just interesting, like, if I meet someone in their 20s and they think they have their life mapped out, I'm like, just wait till you hit 30 because everything you think now is going to be brought into question. You may still agree with yourself, but there's a huge chance you're not going to. And you're going to question like every decision you've made up until this point because it's led to this life that maybe doesn't feel as fulfilling or feel as complete. And this kind of is a great segue. Like, who are you today compared to who you were like even 5 years ago? Like, I know you're a new dad and you're thinking about, life through a new lens. So I would just love to
Hmm.
hear, what that's been like for you too.
Well, I think I think I was very much looking for uh, the life of what can I do that gives me like a comfortable, safe, easy life.
Mm,
And that was probably early 20s. Like, I still worked hard, but I didn't have any aspirations for like running a business or just being at the top of a company. Um, and then I read some books. I talked to some mentors. I just kind of read about people that I admired, and I was like, well, if I'm gonna follow in their footsteps, what I'm doing now is not going to get me to where I want to be. And now I'm kind of in that. I would like to see how far up in my career I could go. I always give myself challenges, intellectual challenges, reading challenges, personal challenges, but I'm like, I've never done a career challenge. Like, let's just see how far and successful I can be, which
Mhm.
is the
Right.
opposite. I think is some people are really driven in their early 20s and 30s, and then they uh then they want to slow down. But I'm like relaxed early, and now I want to like ramp it up.
Yeah, it's definitely the opposite for me. I spent the last 10 years like digging into my career, and now I'm thinking, okay, how do I want to redesign my life going forward? And it doesn't need to be as dramatic as that. I know everyone's situation's different, but it is interesting once you kind of lift your foot off the gas pedal, whatever that looks like for you, and then you recalibrate and you think, what's actually important to me now that I'm not in this fight or flight mode, now that I'm a full blown adult, like how do I actually want to live my life and be in control of, the next 30, 40, 50 years? And who do I see myself becoming? What do I have to do today to make that happen in the future?
It's a tough process. I mean, you've done a lot of soul searching reading. I think you've taken some time to like take a real look at what would make me fulfilled from a if you were to take a job and not start your own business, like what it would have to look like and what options they'd have to give me. And so you have it like you're on the side where you can be very picky about what you do.
Yeah.
Whereas most people don't get to choose their early career. They got like two choices and they fall into
Mhm.
one, and then maybe at some point they can find a way out if they discover that's not what they want to do.
Right. Where do you think that comes from though? Like without being dismissive, because people will say like luck is not created, you work for it and then you're ready for the opportunities that come along to you. But then other people will kind of write off the fact that like their life wasn't easy, they had a lot of challenges and that's why they'll never get ahead. So there seem to be like two general schools of thought and then of course it's a spectrum anywhere in between there. But where do you think that comes from?
Which part comes from what? What comes from what?
So like or maybe not where does it come from, but like how would you kind of describe that? Because you said that I'm coming from like a place of luckiness and that some other people don't have
What
those same opportunities.
is that? What I said?
Yeah, pretty much. Like I'm
Oh, well,
lucky
not
to be picky, I should say.
no. I'm just saying
So okay, so
some people
here's
aren't
my
lucky enough to get to a point in their career where they can
mm,
like slow down, look at it, look at the
yeah,
path ahead, reevaluate. And not that's not really like a luck. I guess lucky is the wrong word. It's just like maybe fortunate or just like I mean, luck happens in life.
it
So I'm
does.
not saying that like
I believe
lucky
in
is the
luck.
wrong word, but
Yeah. I'm just so
what
okay, so the reason I'm like putting you on the spot here is because I think that anyone can do what I do and anyone can look at life the way I look at it. And they're just choosing to look at life in a different way. So, my question is why is it that I am so picky when other people, aren't picky? Like, I've been picky probably my whole life about a whole host of different things. And then there's some areas where I relax because they don't matter as much to me. So I'm not going to be picky in those parts of my life. I think for other people, if I told them like the key to getting ahead is to be picky and be selective, they'd be like, well, I can't be picky. I don't have time to be picky or whatever it is. There'd be
right,
some type of excuse that's more important than the pickiness that in my case is
right.
what's helping me get ahead.
Some of it's randomness. Some of it is just everyone can't be at the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's one of it. So everyone can't be, in my mind, like at the if you have to use class, like upper middle class, like there's just not enough room, I guess,
Yeah, or everyone
in
can't
Western
be
society.
you. Yeah, like my old boss used to
Everyone
say
can't be you.
this all the time, right? Because I would kind of get frustrated with the teams I would have to manage and coach and train and all of that stuff. And I just thought, like, why can't they work the way I work and look at life and the job and the company the way I do? And his response was like, Katrina, like to shake me, if everyone was like you wouldn't have the job that you have. You wouldn't have this, opportunity that you have. And so that was pretty eye opening, just to take a minute to be grateful too, that we are all different. We do all serve different purposes. And like, I can learn so much from people that aren't like me, because I already know all the thoughts I have in my head. I already know how I see life. So if anything, I want to be quiet more often. I want to ask more questions and listen more deeply so I can learn from other people and not just try to control them and tell them like march to this drum because this is the beat that I'm playing.
That's a big thing for your type is, I mean, because there's such a natural predisposition to just like instantly seeing what is wrong,
Hmm.
fixing it, directing it in a certain direction, and then pushing it. And it could be a group, it could be a colleague, it could be just other people. So like to really just like reel all that in, even though you can probably make a very quick and accurate judgment of someone in 5 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and be like, this is going to be a lot of work, or this
Right.
person's on my level, let's go. So
Right. When
I'm
people are
proud of
on
you.
my
I don't think
level,
I could do that.
yeah, when people are on my level, it feels like game over. I'm like, we can't get started fast enough. We can't talk about enough. We don't never have enough time. Like I'm even thinking about this conversation. I'm like, oh, we're probably coming up on time, but like it's never enough when you're connected with someone on like that intellectual frequency and you're just like, okay, you're my person, you get me, I get you, like let's go ham
Hmm.
on this thing, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that could be a becoming, becoming you like, uh, like a staple or like a, just like a, I don't know what we'd call it, but like a maxim that's just like you have to find the people that are on your level, whatever that level is. Get around
Right.
like not a bubble, but like people that help you and collaborate with you and bring out your best.
Hmm.
Um, is the only way that you're going to go up in life.
Yeah.
I say up. I don't say career. I say up, progress.
Yeah.
Um, and that is it. So first, if your situation in life is bad, I think you should do a audit of your current surroundings of people and be like, I need to get rid of some of these people and
Hmm.
find people that are like me or a little better than me and
Right.
figure out what they're about.
Right. Yeah. Check the inventory of your life. Are people supporting you? Are they encouraging you? Are they tearing you down to justify their own choices? And then maybe reevaluate who you're giving priority in your life. I mean, we do outgrow our friend groups, we outgrow different opportunities, especially if growth and lifelong learning is important to us. Like it's natural that you're going to evolve through those groups of people, and taking stock and inventory of your life is a really great kind of spring cleaning habit to be in.
Yeah. Yes, and I guess the friends group thing is hard because as you transition out of your 20s into your 30s, a lot of people are just they went to high school with their college. Like some of them are, they say you want to have kids and they don't want to have kids. Well, it's harder to get together. The lifestyle's
Mhm.
different. You have their time is so compressed. I've had that happen a lot with people. It's like we just really can't do any of those things anymore, man. You're gonna
Right.
come over here, or like it's only gonna be
Yeah.
once a year that we see you. So sometimes you just end up you have to be okay with that, where you start to lose those friends and get new
Right.
friends that are
And not
friends that are
take
at the
it
same stage of
personally.
life too.
Yeah. And not take it personally. I mean, change in life in general, we can't be taking everything personally all the time. I think it's too exhausting. So that's great, Joe. Thank you for that.
Thank
Are there
you.
any final thoughts you have that you'd want to share with the audience when you think about, becoming yourself and, who you've kind of morphed into over the years and how you see
Mhm.
yourself growing into the future?
I think one thing, the one thing I'll say, if I was just one line I can give of advice would be, I think taking stock of your own thoughts and to wonder if they're actually coming from a place where it's like, I don't know. I just have always heard this. Every time you think about that for something, be like, where does that come from, and evaluate it. And that's where like the real, like, why my first book was called Marble and Sculptor is just like because the change requires pain because you're both the marble and the sculptor. So it's like evaluating your thought process and then going like, do I actually believe that, or is it just like a meme I've heard from my parents and school and
Right.
friends, and has it actually been detrimental to my growth and my growth. That
Yeah.
is probably one of the things that as I came to 30 years old, I went, I have to unlearn a lot of it. You mentioned that
Mhm.
word. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of just memes in our head that float around. Like I'm trying to think of one that I that's like very everyone can hear. If you think of one, let me know. But it's like something that you've heard all your life that you actually sat down and thought, what is this about? Can you name one? Because
Well,
I can't right now.
yeah, it's funny that you mentioned this. I just put myself through this exact type of exercise, and I call it like peeling the onion back, like peeling layers back on myself and bringing what I refer to as values, into question, into the light. And I'm like, okay, is this important to me, or was it something my mom found valuable and like drilled into my head? And now here I am, like abiding by that, but I don't really value that in the same way anymore. So, whether it's a meme from the internet or some type of core belief, I think that it is really good to kind of check in with yourself and ask yourself, like, is this important to me or is it important to someone else? And if it's important to someone else, like, that's fine, but then it's not my problem and I can let it go, from my mental um, orbit, or like just the bandwidth. It can be overloading sometimes to care so much
Yeah,
about all these other things.
yeah. And so I would say if you can examine all of your thoughts deeply and your convictions on things, like you said, I think you might change your convictions. And the way that you have to like try to read, and I just keep going back to philosophy, you have to understand like the structure of your thought process
Right.
was set early. The way that you think about things can be, you can challenge yourself, but I can't figure out a different medium that will help you than like reading philosophy from some of the greatest that I've ever thought.
Right. Right.
Back then, people could just think, you
Yeah,
know,
I know. I know you
they just sat and
mentioned.
thought and they wrote books on it.
Right, exactly. Reckless abandon with deep thinking. I mean, there's so many
Yes.
books that come to mind, like Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. That's just basically about isolating yourself long enough to just let the creativity flow and like really get to know, your own thoughts and not be so distracted with like the notifications and the calendar invites and the meetings and all of that.
Yes. But Cal Newport's book is just about Carl Jung's castle
Oh, of course.
that he
It's
went
just a
into. So
regurgitated thought.
just well, no, he talks about it. He's like he literally talks about in the first. He's like Carl Jung isolated himself in a castle that had no running water, and that's where he wrote. And I'm like, and then in Rick Rubin's book, he brought that up again. He's like Carl Jung. It's like you don't need to read Cal, you just read Carl. Go to the source.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
before Carl, there was some shaman in like like BC that was doing the same
Right.
thing.
Right.
So I guess you could read
He's
Cal if you
funny.
need it
I
condensed,
know,
but
yeah.
I'm just yeah.
Cal's the
Sorry.
modern version. The one written in today's language. That's
Right.
too
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, sorry that triggered me. I had to rant for
No,
a
no, I
second.
appreciate
I
that.
think it's just like I think it's my like, Ryan Holiday and stoicism. I'm like, but I guess it needs to be repackaged every so often for the current generation to understand it. So I
Yeah,
guess I get that too.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, people in general don't even like to read books, so the chances of them picking up an old book with old language probably less likely. But as someone who studied psychology in her undergrad, hello, like I love Carl Jung or any reference to that field.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and just the opportunity to kind of like drudge it up. I mean, there's just so much we can kind of, I mean, clearly it's being restated multiple generations, in a row because there's something valuable there. And yeah, everyone can have like their own take on it, but the core, belief of just needing that alone time. Yes, we're beings of community and we need, social aspects, but we still need alone
Right.
time. We need to retreat, recharge our batteries, and kind of sit with our own thoughts and figure out what are our thoughts compared to what's the world telling me I should care about. And how can I just focus on what I care about, following my personal intuition, my purpose on this planet? I mean, we're here for a blip and then keeps moving. So how do you want to spend your time? I think it's a good practice to have.
I think that's a great place to end.
Great. Well, this is awesome, Joe. Thanks for being on Becoming You. I loved having you.
Yes, and I cannot wait to see this in 6 months from now.
Okay, it'll be sooner than that. Thanks.
Okay.
You are my most important listener, and I can't thank you enough for spending your time with me. If this content resonates with you, then hit subscribe. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube by following @ConnectorQueen. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Becoming You.